Thanks for,
You're gonna have
service.
a variety of services.
There was a proposal, wasn't
That makes sense.
They have a huge kitchen.
there? Yeah, which they didn't do.
I can see, you know, for diagnostic center for a lot of things that, you know.
But also community space, I think they call it.
Right.
Yes.
They should not tear it down. That's right.
In the twilight zone.
Emergency.
Right.
I guess they're gonna staff some ambulances over there just.
Oh, to then drive people up, yeah.
People aren't paying attention.
Or don't know. you know.
Well, that should make parking back here easier.
Maybe.
Where do you guys all park when you come to this, for instance?
Usually park in the front.
On the sort of
It's pressing.
okay, I just park on the street, right? So you're gonna be like official.
Well, there's also some guest spots.
Oh, there are.
Building
When you
here.
come up behind.
Yeah.
No.
Hey. How you doing? You room at the table? Yeah, I was gonna say that. I can make more. Here.
Pretty comfortable right here.
That's to not be upstairs.
All right, we only got about a minute and then we'll go live.
Yeah, and we're only seeing two council members, so you have quorum.
Well, Kristen may be one.
You hear anything from me, Jerry?
I did not hear from you, Jay.
Mr. Comments about notes.
Barbara Hill?
Didn't.
I think I saw somebody when I was coming in. Someone gave me a wave. They're in their car.
Oh.
And so I'm not sure, exactly sure who it was, but I assume it was some member of the group. I was so sorry someone so friendly gave me a wave. I don't know.
It wasn't a commentary in driving.
I hope not. If anything, I felt like I was going a bit slower than the person behind me while coming up here, so maybe.
Well, should we start? Let's start.
Yeah.
Kristen will join us. This is the, you're gonna give your little speech?
Yep, I think,
Okay, go ahead.
my.
Yeah, you have to give a speech.
Was it about the being recorded? I
Yeah.
haven't done that once.
No, really? You have to
Do
do
we still
that.
have to do that?
All right, we're not doing that. Not doing that.
Right, I'm not doing my speech.
Okay. For the benefit of the people, because we have guests, for the benefit of the guests, let's go around and introduce ourselves. We'll start with Claudette.
Claudette Ford, been on the council for a while, former public works director for the cities of New Haven, Connecticut, Oakland, California, or California.
So this is like a busman's holiday. We've
In many ways, in many ways.
I'm Bob Dennison. I'm the outgoing chair of the council. I'm a retired civil engineer. I was the chief engineer for New York State Department of Transportation.
John Grosspolen, the incoming chair, been on the council for probably 8 years, maybe more, I don't know, long time,
Since the beginning.
almost. And I've got a strong interest in the topic, veteran long distance bicycle tours, been around the country, seen a lot of infrastructure. Gives me ideas about what's good and bad.
Brian Slack, Ulster County Transportation Council, Ulster County Planning Department, and Ulster County Traffic Safety Board.
Hi, Paul Stankus.
What's up?
I've been on the council for about 6 months and really, I'm a lay person when it comes to this stuff. Just have an interest overall in the safety and well-being of bikers, walkers, and drivers. And so I want to help the city get to a better place.
Hi, everybody. Emily Flynn, Director of Health and Wellness for the City of Kingston.
Mayor Steve Noble, I've been there since 2016, and also an avid walker and biker, and drive once in a while.
Ernie Ostrov, City of Kingston Police Department.
Go ahead.
Just recently been involved in the enforcement portion of the parking and things like that, involved with bike lanes and
The area's kind of taken our lead down there, police department side of it for being the, say, the department liaison between all of it. So that's why I brought it along, so we can kind of get a better feel for it. So, and I'm a junior to the other city.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And it looks like EJ is joining here. Hey, Kristen.
Kristen's here.
So do you want to take a moment to let her introduce herself?
Absolutely. Go ahead, EJ, introduce yourself. Elizabeth.
Can you hear us, EJ?
She can't hear a thing you're saying.
I was worried about that.
Yeah. He's muted.
I just want to confirm that. Okay, so you should be able to hear us. EJ, can you hear us? Now maybe she's frozen. You're definitely muted. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, maybe she hears us.
I got two invitations. It was weird. Anyway, I closed the other one. Okay, hi.
Hi.
So can you introduce yourself to because we have guests.
Oh, I'm sorry. Elizabeth Michelle. I'm a resident. I live on Franklin Street, so was pretty involved in the Franklin Street project. Thank you, Steve. They did a fabulous job. We're all very happy.
And Kristen, welcome, Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Wilson. I'm with Robco, formerly with the city.
She knows everything there is to know about the police. The whole business, okay?
Sure.
And I'll just give you a point of background. We did introduce this topic at our last meeting, and it's been good to have you here to explain it further.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is something that started many, many years ago. At this point, we created a subcommittee kind of out of this group called the Sidewalk Task Force. And a couple of individuals worked to kind of come up with some ideas and proposals on how we could work to improve our hundreds of miles of sidewalks in the city of Kingston, and how to fund that type of improvement. Right now, as everyone's aware, the cost of sidewalk maintenance is put on the homeowner or business owner here in the city. And we have, over the last couple of years, been very ambitious in getting grant funding to be able to replace, and improve sidewalks in our community. And that's where we kind of got to, Franklin Street and Broadway and soon to be Henry Street and many of our other kind of major corridors. We've tried to find funding, but there are just literally hundreds of streets that have sidewalks on that we haven't been able to address without a long-term plan. And I wanted to just basically bring this up again to the Complete Streets Council to just really be able to start the conversation. And maybe it is kind of reforming the sidewalk task force again, to be able to just have some more concerted effort at looking at best practices across our country and across New York State as to how, we could do this. I mean, we've looked at ways of doing this from implementing sidewalk districts where, a sidewalk fee is basically assessed on all of the property owners in the city to be able to make that work. We've looked at ways where maybe there's more of a shared ownership where, say, the city has responsibility of sections of sidewalk that abut, say, street trees. And the city is responsible for those sections of the sidewalks, and then the remaining sections of the sidewalks are still the responsibility of the property owner. And there can be a more concerted effort to fix some of those areas once, we have control over some of those kind of problem spots, like trees and telephone poles and other things that sometimes can disrupt sidewalks. And then there's other options like also making sure that people fix their sidewalks before they can sell a building or a property, and mandating that sidewalks be brought up to appropriate ADA specs in order for a property to close, and that be taken care of in advance. And so lots of ideas. I think charting a path forward is where I think we would like some help before we even got to the level of talking about it with our common council and the public. I think having kind of a internal working group to be able to try to at least figure out maybe some of the best practices and just in doing some internet research, there are actually lots of colleges and research institutions that have done some of this work already that have put together some really good, pros and cons lists, but we have to kind of adapt it to Kingston. And a lot of the sidewalk work that I've seen done across the country seems to be done outside the Northeast. And it's interesting. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just a different, maybe you guys know why. But we have it a little bit harder here, I think, in the Northeast. And so I'd like to see where this goes. I don't have a timeline. I'm not saying we have to do this by a certain date. But I do think that it's something that I felt like we talked a lot about it in the early part of my tenure as mayor. And I just feel like we haven't really made a lot of progress in figuring out the long-term plan. Yet we have made lots of progress in fixing sidewalks in the city, but not everywhere and in a way that is sustainable and long-lasting. And so that's my ask, is to just see if there are folks that would be willing to work with us.
Revitalization, which is, given that when I joined the council some years ago, Kristen was working on it, we worked on it, and put in place new sidewalk standards for the city, which is a huge deal. And the common council adopted them in their place, and that was big. And at the time, we talked about how you implement this. Now, Emily's project for the pedestrian bicycle master plan is. This is the right time. She'll be generating that soon. With that will come the ADA compliance plan, our plan to comply with the American Disabilities Act, which is a requirement. That will come from being an offshoot of that plan. So I think it's a good idea to put together and refresh what we did before and move forward. So. And I will defer to Kristen because she knows everything there's.
Well, I think one of my questions is, I think we did identify a good solution, which is the sidewalk improvement district, and it's been well received, I think, in Ithaca and maybe Schenectady. Is that?
So,
I
don't know about New Paltz, but I
So,
know Schenectady and Ithaca had used that.
Yeah. As a model that's worked in New York State, and I'm wondering if there's reluctance to move forward with that. As far as, we know what the path forward is, we have to do a referendum. Just sitting here at this particular moment in time, my opinion would be like, let's go forward with it and see how the public responds. If they don't like it and they don't vote for the referendum, then we look at the other options. But I think I just from my past research, feel like that would be the solution that would be the most sustainable and, would get 3 miles of sidewalk done a year consistently. And would also enable the city to do sidewalks in a uniform way as opposed to, okay, a house here, house there, redoes their sidewalks. What we've done on Broadway, Franklin, Henry, we've been able to rehab the whole streetscape and make sure that there's enough trees and if you do that in a spotty manner, we're just gonna kind of get the hodgepodge that we already have. So those would be my reasons for moving forward with the sidewalk.
Would the first step of moving forward being the sale to the common council?
Yeah, obviously.
No small fee.
No, I mean, it's not an easy sell, but I guess my question is there political will to move forward with that and see how it goes?
I think the biggest thing that I think we've learned since then is that financial model that we created to kind of get 3 miles of sidewalk done a year, I think ended up not being, probably not enough money generated to really do that. Based on just our experiences on Franklin Street, for instance, we did, less than a mile of sidewalks. And it cost almost $2.some million or more at this point. And that, I think, is one of my concerns about how much money would we really be able to generate to be able to do what we've done on Franklin Street on all of our streets in the city? And that's where I think, I guess setting the, setting the determining factor of like what type of sidewalk improvements would we actually be doing, I guess is a question that we would have to wrestle with is, are we just kind of going in and doing a 4-foot concrete sidewalk and nothing else? Are we doing bluestone, are we, doing a concrete pad underneath the bluestone like we did on Franklin so that it lasts a really long time and it really meets kind of those ADA requirements? I think my concern with our kind of initial offering was that those costs are going to be extremely high. And so we may not be able to get done a lot with the funds that we have, and once we add on like, the cost of having the engineer in place and, the other, some of those staffing costs, it's just like along with that type of program. But it's, I think, something we could maybe, again, relook at to see if like based on today's, costs and the kind of the math that we've seen on Broadway, Franklin, seem to be Henry, like what could we get done and what was the kind of cost per square foot of some of the projects, even if we take out the street trees and we take out the curbing, just doing sidewalks without curbing, what would that?
But you're asking
Well,
to refresh. You're asking us to refresh. Which I think is one of the
Yeah, and certainly I think we could redo the numbers. I think another thing that I would say about Franklin or Henry or Broadway, I mean, those were all, well, Franklin didn't have DOT funding, but they all had federal funding built into them, which increased the cost. And would the cost change if we did it a different way? Like, how DPW does paving with Callahan, it's a lot less expensive than doing paving on a federal aid project. So perhaps there will ultimately be a lot of cost savings to the city if we're able to do it in a different way with local contractors,
And that's why Franklin will be a good example, because that one was a non-DOT project.
But it was still a state aid, not.
But to what
federal
extent,
aid,
there was an
but yeah.
engineering component to it. I mean,
Yeah.
I worked in a DPW when I was younger, and we had a sidewalk program that was funded through taxpayers. There's no design in the sidewalks. We framed it ourselves and we did the sidewalks, and that would be great if we could have an internal program through our Department of Public Works, and just get out there and do those sidewalks.
And
If we had a
internal-
dedicated funding stream.
Yeah,
Staffing through DPW.
and stuff through the city engineer, like we would have an internal sidewalk engineer.
Right, that was the other.
Who would be doing the engineering instead of having to contract out to consultants.
Burlington has a model.
Yeah.
So I guess, go ahead.
As I say, it's been done when I was in New Haven. We paved our streets and at the same time, we did the curb replacement and the sidewalks. It was all part of the same project. It was similar, even I believe in Oakland as well. And we managed to get a lot of sidewalks replaced and repaired using the street tree example. If it was our tree, mainly the city tree, and obviously we took care of that, but we also made provisions in some areas for the homeowner to tag along with that and then pay. But mostly when we did the street, we looked at the sidewalks, we made sure we repaired the sidewalks and then we paved the streets. It was all part of the same project.
I think at the end of the day, clearly there's no easy way forward here. If we all want the same goal, which are better ADA compliant sidewalks. Everything will have a cost. And it would be interesting to see I don't know if we could open it up to the Engage Kingston site to see what, if we did a survey, what people would prefer most of all.
And if we put together a group to look at this, which I think is probably a good thing to do, and we included Ed Norman, for example, because he's got a stake in this, and come up with some sort of proposal, move to the next stage.
Right, and I think.
Refresh what we have and add to it.
Fresh the numbers.
And understanding that this may be a difficult subject for our elected officials to have with taxpayers, but one of the alternatives, a real alternative, is If we don't fund it, then it could revert back to the responsibility of the property owner. And they might have to pay even more in order to.
Which is where it is today. You know, I run across people.
But it's not enforced.
Well,
There's
you know,
no real enforcement.
I've seen it enforced by people's homeowners. I've seen an insurance company go to somebody and say, your sidewalk is dangerous, I'm not gonna insure you unless you fix it.
But I
I mean,
mean,
there's a $5,000 ticket right there for you.
I've walked by council persons' houses that there's no way you can get a
Yeah.
wheelchair down these sidewalks because they're so overgrown.
That's our other liability.
I don't have sidewalks.
Right. We could end up with an ADA suit,
I was gonna say.
That's what's happening.
Lawsuit to come.
That's,
you know.
litigation for these things is becoming more and more prevalent. In fact, I had to laugh because I saw a commercial for a lawyer telling New York City residents that, you know, if you have a trip and fall, please sue this city. And I know this from spending a lot of time in court in New Haven over trip and falls. And we went into a very aggressive program because of it. And I was amazed when I came to Kingston that there didn't seem to be the same.
We get the numbers are not big.
Yeah, I know. I was amazed. This is not a litigious group of people, but I think they're coming. And I think that we should be ahead of the game. And those of us who do have issues, if we're going to profess to be a walkable city, we really need to.
So what we'll do, I guess, I'll leave it to the new chair, but what I'd suggest is that we get volunteers from the council and put together another shot at a refresh and some background work, another shot at it. Is that makes sense? You're getting out of this, Kristen.
I just have okay, sidewalk task force. I'm just wondering, is there, can you tell us where the ped bike plan is? And are there any resources left for those planning consultants to help us with? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bike and master plan, we're waiting on a second draft, so a first draft has been reviewed by city staff. We had many changes that took a long time. So now we're waiting for a second draft for the city staff to review, and we'll put it out to the public.
So in that, did those consultants have any opinions or thoughts about sidewalk improvement district, or?
They thought we should look into it more.
Oh, okay.
Because it wasn't a sidewalk improvement study.
Yeah,
It wasn't part of their
It
job.
wasn't part of what.
yeah.
So they like, so for example, they also talk about bluestone, they're like, you should do a bluestone study. But the bike and master plan wasn't a bluestone study,
Right.
so same kind of thing.
And our sidewalk ordinance that was adopted, you know, limits the bluestone to the historic district or people who want to pay for it themselves, which is somewhat problematic, because it is a challenge to make it ADA.
I mean, I think another part of the discussion for this sidewalk task force is going to be bluestone, and it's the elephant in the room or the ball that we keep batting around. And if we continue to make decisions on a street by street process, it's just over time cost the city millions and millions of dollars. And so I'm definitely concerned about that, about not having a bluestone. I mean, we tried a little bit,
There's a story, you know, and it's limited in the standards.
but it still opens it up to constant street by street analysis. And if you think about the cost to the taxpayer over time, I think that it's very complicated.
Okay, good. So I think we'll put together a group and see what we can do about it.
Great, and we'll make sure that we bring our staff resources to bear too, to be able to make sure that my city staff that are relevant are participating. I don't know how much they participated the last time in terms of DPW or
It was
engineering.
between DPWs
Yeah.
and, you know, it's not.
So we'll try to make sure that we.
Actually, they did participate a lot when we did the sidewalk
I think
code.
that's serious, yeah.
Yeah,
the code,
DPW
yeah.
and engineering,
Yeah.
yeah, they were all here. They were.
Yeah, not for the
it's
code,
like-
but for the sidewalk
For
improvement
the
district.
improvement district, not as much because we didn't make it that far, but
Right, for the code they were there.
yeah, for the code they were.
I think for going forward with your working group, I'm happy to
Yeah.
have my staff kind of sit in and be a part of that process. Yeah, so that's all I had today. So I appreciate everybody's time and energy and, just wanted to, and I don't know whether it's reading it in the master plan that Emily was working on or, what, but it just kind of caught my attention of like, hey, we haven't really moved the ball on this very far. And I feel like there's an opportunity to still do so in years ahead. So,
Be great.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
yeah.
Can I mess around with your agenda?
Of course, it's not mine.
Well, the agenda. The next two things on the agenda, and there's a third part of it that I just want to address. That's the road hero piece where Kingston Police is helping Emily with our whole, let me use that. We decided when the improvements to the city transportation system started to come in earnest the last couple of years, where they talked about eliminating traffic signals, which we did in a number of places for very good reasons. The roundabout construction at the end of Broadway project with the bike path. One of the things that came out of this council was that we believe that there needed to be an education piece for the people who are operating automobiles and who are walking and riding bicycles in the city. So we pushed for an education program, which had its ups and downs through the city council. And ultimately, we came up with an education program. And Emily's gang has been working on it, and it's good, and there's a lot of buses, we have signs up, so little progress, we're making progress. As part of that, some of the conversation came up with the common council about lowering the speed limit in the city. And we wrote a memo after our last meeting. I think we copied you. I know we sent it to the mayor and to the common council in response to that. In essence, our memo said lowering the speed limit to 25 miles an hour is really an exercise in futility, unless you're gonna, the first step should be getting people to comply with the 30 mile an hour speed limit, which is in the city. And I would like to believe that the common council's increase in your budget to do that work was in part influenced by that amount. We don't know that to be the case. That coupled with the fact that Tom Polk got a grant from the Highway Safety Board for about 68 grand, something like that, for bicycle and stuff. I guess in the county, right?
He has, it's a 3-step training program, which will include working with county drivers, CDL drivers on bike-friendly practices. And that is very much in the works to be deployed this spring.
He's getting a lot of money for that.
Yeah, I think he can broaden the horizon as well. We're gonna try to get as many county drivers involved in that program as possible.
So it's like education of CDL drivers
Yeah,
specifically?
we're starting with our Department of Public Works drivers, and they have to go through mandatory training regardless. And then it's not an annual training, but it's regular training, essentially defensive driving training. And so we decided, well, let's tack on Tom's 90-minute training seminar to that defensive driving mandatory training. And that was the original plan. And apparently the defensive driving training is going to take too long. So they're going to do both, but in separate sessions. For DPW, we'd also like to get our UCAT bus drivers involved as well. And even open it up to even more drivers. I mean, maybe we could even, if Tom wants to reapply for funding, for another year of funding through the GTSC, we could try to expand it to not just county employees, because that's an easy
Right, captive group.
captive audience, exactly, but to other municipal drivers and other individuals. It's very much a pilot.
So our hope is with this enforcement piece, I did a project in another line in Muncie. We had significant pedestrian issues. Lots of people walk there, especially on Friday nights. They were black, and it's dangerous. So we went through a whole process there, and with the help of the Muncie PD, to encourage people to respect pedestrians, stop for crosswalks, and it was very effective. So having a targeted, funded piece of enforcement will help us get to the goal of reasonable speeds in the city. so that people don't. So that if people conform to the 30 mile an hour speed limit in the city, it's probable, I would think, that lowering the speed limit to 25 will lose its allure. That's the goal. So, well, I know Tom's been coordinating with you guys, you certainly should touch base with you. But that is background. I guess we can, do you want to do your, where you are with road here? And then we can do.
You covered a lot of it.
Plans are? Oh, okay.
We can, because I think it does then queue up the citation flyers with the chief. So why don't I share, basically what I have today is a report that our consultant has pulled together that summarizes what we've done thus far. And then I have hard copy, I always like to have the actual consistency. So I brought the extra copies of the mailers, and I brought what I call the citation flyer.
Which is a great idea. These are good ideas.
Yeah, that the police chief may want to give us an update on. These are for
One
final.
of the principles, and Brian, is, changing people's behavior in traffic is, it goes it's engineering, what's the problem? Education, tone is a problem, and then lastly, it's important. So you gotta give them a chance, first know, identify the problem, and first know that there's a problem, that people should pay attention to the problem and not violate the law and things. And then the last thing, hopefully it doesn't get to the last one. My experience is you always get to the last one.
That's some.
Every year, every time we used to do a target enforcement thing, where we tell people if you do speeding tickets, if you go on time too fast, and we would advertise it, and we would have fines, and we would have, and we would do it for 2 weeks, and every year we would do an incredible amount of speeding tickets. And we're doing it. So, we told you we're gonna do.
So can I just mention a few things? So this whole campaign, if I recall correctly, was $45,000. It's the Be a Road Hero campaign. The consultant did quite a bit of research, you'll see in here, of other cities. We asked them to go back and do research in the cities that were more local in New York State. It's tied into a larger campaign called Heads Up. So they compared some of, the idea is that you can see the data and you can see the consequences of their campaigns and sort of match it up against our campaign. The disappointing thing was in other cities, when they did this campaign, those cities actually saw an increase in traffic crashes, unfortunately. We don't think it's necessarily causal, but I think it's a sort of a sign that, so that's why the consultant here really tries to emphasize that we have not seen any increases during the course of this year. The work that I'm really proud of is the bus ads. Some of the social media ads did the best, got the most comments of any city social media post.
Positive comments?
No, I'm not gonna say that. But the whole point is an awareness. So we got people talking.
Right, okay.
And now I believe that the consultant is working with the police department to do some posts on their social media. I don't know if that has happened yet, but if it hasn't, it's going to happen. I sort of feel like this was a pilot transportation education project, and I feel like we have the tools now to, because of my design skills, I have all of the working files. I think I mentioned it, but I'm gonna mention it again. If we decided we wanted to do a campaign about e-bikes in the future, we could sort of put it into these materials pretty easily. So we have the foundation for ongoing transportation education, campaigns.
Good. That is good. And it's likely to end up doing something with these bikes someday, I suspect. Right.
Any questions?
Really good job putting this all together. It's a lot of work and it wasn't easy in the beginning, so.
Should we go on Facebook and say you're doing a wonderful thing and this is a great thing?
I want to write a letter to my boss.
Your boss knows.
I'm wondering if you guys have a policeman assigned to your Facebook for responses.
We don't allow comments on Facebook.
Oh, you don't allow, okay, okay.
That's what we are.
All right, yeah, well, maybe it's a good thing.
It's a
Getting
good
the
thing.
Education out
Yeah,
there.
it's a good
Yeah.
thing. But so with Nikki Jones, I've been in touch with one of their employees there, and admittedly, it was on my end that there was a glitch. Turns out we have a Facebook business page. Yeah, I couldn't figure it out. I realized I had to like dissect it, and so I created a page back in 2011. when I became executive lieutenant, and all the supervisors have access, but I guess recently Facebook now is termed Meta, right? That's the, and when it did that, it flipped away from the business Facebook page, and I could not, for the life of me, and it struggled, and to figure out how to get it converted. And even the individual I worked with, who was very patient with me, I sent screenshots, I gave him remote access to my computer. He says, I don't understand what's happening here. So finally, I went through and just locked myself in my office and started at 8 in the morning. By 6 o'clock that night, I had figured it out and was able to convert it over. And now my page, my access page to the Kingston Police Facebook page is very different than everybody else's. One of the meetings, I actually said, hey, do you guys notice a change on your Facebook access? And they're like, no, it looks the same. I'm like, well, interesting. Mine's all this analytical stuff now, and I see, so, but the good news is we still turn off comments, and
Don't change mine.
don't change that, right? But so at this point, they do have access, and Nikki Jones as an agency does have access, so they can be posting now regularly on it, so we're going to move forward with those.
And that's the last chapter of this work for this project. So
Yeah.
once that's sort of done, I can check that box off that we've done the Be a Road Hero campaign.
Does the common council get a copy of this report?
No, not yet. You guys just seen it first.
So what happens next?
I'm going to cross a thing off my to-do list. So maybe you should.
So what happens next?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there isn't any, new common council funding that's been allocated, to this campaign in particular. So thankfully, we're gonna continue to use, our in-house, opportunities to be able to still promote these images, to continue to share some of the work that we've done already. I think that, we'll talk about a little bit with some of the work that KPD is doing and going to be doing. We're going to be able to mesh our Be a Road Hero campaign all through 2023 with this increased traffic enforcement and, specifically for, in the areas of bicycle pedestrian safety out on the roadways. And I think that that's how we're going to keep it going. So I actually think that people are going to continue to hear a lot about Be a Road Hero through 2023. And I think that that's good. And I think that that's what we had said to the county council is that, you make this one-time investment. It's not going to be enough to, last forever, but it is going to give us a lot of work or kind of like commodity to work with over the next year to 2 years. And so I think that this is going to help us, be able to message what we're doing on kind of this new enforcement page in a campaign that we then don't have to brand this as something separate, right? It's all going to be now part of this initiative. And I think we always say like, you have to first start with education, but then eventually you need enforcement. And it's great that when you can intertwine the two, and I think that that's what, these types of things that we're doing now, it's really being able to mix the two together really well. So.
Can I just quickly speak to this piece, because it is that really in between education and enforcement. So we made it look like the kind of formal citation that you give out, but it's not, it doesn't have a negative consequence. It's an educational piece. So it's got a QR code that drives to Engage Kingston website. And on the back, it's got this illustration that I created, just want to get credit for that. That shows people where to park in the bike lanes. And I think that that's key. So.
And not.
Sorry, thank you very much. And it's in English and Spanish, so it's really an education piece. So I think
It ties
it's.
it back to the Be a Road Hero.
And it's branded as Be a Road Hero. And so it's really, I think we've actually been recognized by some other people to state that they want to see this piece to be inspirational to other places, because it is kind of unique to have an education piece like this.
Is there a way to track sort of engagement with that in any way?
Do you have any idea how many you're giving out?
Probably not right now. Yeah, we don't normally, what we call, refer to as punch a card or make a blotter notation on something like this, unless it's an enforcement, so for us to track it. But we are, every lineup where the officer's going to get their assignments, their daily assignments, the supervisors are encouraging them to focus on that. In specific cases, the lieutenant actually identifies officers that have shown willingness already to be part of that. You know, to be completely honest with you, we have officers that are ready to enforce. I just got to take the leash off, right? So, I mean, that's just the way they are, right? They just want to break the ticket. But to find the ones that are willing to kind of, to find the balance, they're the ones that we're trying to grow down. I think the lieutenant's put a list together that we've already talked to and will continue to talk to about finding that balance, right? There's times where individuals just need to friendly reminder, hey, in the future, and there's other times that, you know, as I've said before, they don't want to hear it from the cop, they got to hear it from the judge directly, right? So here's your ticket, go to court, the judge will tell you what I'm telling you today, but in a stern voice. So we're trying to find those individuals, which I think we've done that already. So yeah, a bunch lined up. And, we've had a couple already. I know we've taken some pictures, put that out there, promotion wise.
That was a challenge, by the way.
Yeah, take the picture.
One of the things that I will say is that, you know, these were, we printed 1,000 of these. And so yes, some have been used for educational purposes like we are here today, but most of them have been given to KPD to hand out. So we should be able to know, checking the pile once in a while, you know, how many we're actually handing out. So there's at least when we run out of 1,000 of these, we'll know that we've maybe given out at least 900, out to actual residents.
Just gotta make sure when you're walking down Broadway, you don't see them in the gutter.
Right. But hopefully we don't have that many to hand out.
Yeah. If you walk down Broadway, you also see them.
Well, that's always the concern, right? The concern is that someone goes, yeah, whatever, right? And then toss it in the ground. So, but our efforts are certainly focused on this and with the additional monies that the council will be given specifically towards traffic enforcement throughout the city. Ernie and I have already sat down and kind of worked out our hopes in trying to use these individuals both for education and for enforcement. The truth is there are people that we know we're going to put out just for enforcement, you know, when it comes time. So, but we're giving everybody the opportunity to do it the right way. With everything that's going on with the streetscape, we recognize, we've seen it firsthand. And I took a quick walk in plain clothes one afternoon, and we recognize that there's individuals that just have a complete disregard for, you know, both sides. Pedestrians walking where they're not supposed to, and cars not stopping when they're supposed to. So we're going to be tackling that, and we're trying to follow a model that kind of suits, well, certainly falls within the abilities of what we have available to us now, PD, right, manpower and time, but does focus more on the enforcement, on the education component, and then later on the enforcement. So we'll start easy, and then hopefully the word gets out, and then if not, then we'll take the leash off on something and see what happens there. So I know that will be a very small number. So, but unless, you know, you have other things you'd like to see us do, if you have certain locations with, as I've mentioned to council members before, you know, once they get the complaint, they usually call my office, hey, we got speeders, we got stop signs, whatever, and we kind of send out the team to take care of that. But if you're seeing an area or one particular type, you mentioned speeding enforcement for 30 miles an hour, you know, and I know it's very difficult to enforce it in a city environment with a marked patrol car. So we've got to get very creative that way. It's not, you're not parking behind a tree on Route 28 or 209, you know, hiding in the bushes, right? There's no bushes to hide around here. And the distance that we're talking about is somewhat limited. So, and with the paving that's been going on, which has been great for us as a city, you know, people complain about the potholes, there's new pavement, people complain about the speed on the pavement now, right? So it's just, we're following through with it. And but if you find that you have certain level of complaints in certain parts of Kingston, then we'll focus our efforts with that team that we're putting together just on those areas.
Have radar.
We have capability. So we don't have radar in every car. Normally we assign the units out. Right now we have 2 LiDAR or 3.
LiDAR, we have 2.
2.
And that came up in, I don't know what meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the county transportation safety. We weren't even sure Kingston had radar.
Yeah, we actually, Lieutenant right now is in the middle of way this week teaching the radar course for our basic course officers or academy police. So we do every year a radar class to make sure all of our officers are certified in the use of radar and LiDAR. Again, it's not so much the equipment or the training. It's the time to get out there, specifically assigning them to that task. And two, location. You know, in the city environment, it makes it somewhat difficult. You know, we've had some success when we were both street cops of doing like a plainclothes officer beyond the bush on the corner and then having a vehicle around the corner ready to do the pickup. We may have to go back to that old school type of enforcement at some point. You know, driving around it's not the same.
Would it, I'm gonna ask you to be frank, would it be helpful? Do you find the governor's traffic safety committee grants to be helpful in supporting that activity and that ability to get your officers out there and deployed? I mean, there's grants available. They seem, when I review the countywide grant recipients, the dollar amounts are relatively small, $15,000 or less. Every little bit helps. Is that a beneficial program? Is that something that you would see maybe asking Ruth Ann Devitt to assist with a grant to assist getting out there to have more resources for?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, any additional monies can always help. I mean, you want me to be frank? Right?
Yeah.
So part of the difficulty we're going through now is that although we're budgeted for 74 officers, we're not at that full complement.
Right.
We're trying to get that count up. We're very lucky. We're going to be doing some new hires coming up there, but it just doesn't seem that we're able to get our feet underneath us. You know, now we have 2 officers graduating the academy next week. They go through field training. They're not essentially, I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're almost not usable to us in the capacity until they complete that training 11 weeks from now. So once they're good, we can set them loose. They can do what they have to do. But in that time frame, we're losing an additional 4 officers to retirements. So at that point now, we're just not able to keep up. I mean, you know, part of the other responsibility is he oversees the 4 to 12th afternoon shift. So in addition to all this other stuff we're doing, he has to put out a squad, and those supervisors are responsible for identifying what weaknesses or what areas of weakness we have to, you know, put officers out to address. Those monies, although they are, you know, STEP and
PTS.
and
Well, it's
right.
PTS.
Right. So I mean, at that point, we do that for the enforcement procedure for enforcement purposes. So it's never the equipment, right? We're pretty well stocked on the equipment part of it. The training part, where our officers are, you know, either he's responsible for BAL breathalyzer and for radar. So he's on top of all that, but it just becomes a matter of scheduling and time. And with the lack of manpower, and again, no fault of mayor, the council, the funding's there, we're just not being able to hire them fast enough, which is a problem across law enforcement all over at this point. Every agency we talk to is struggling. We find that all officers are working overtime to cover shift work, and we're not able to assign them overtime assignments, or at least allow them to choose those assignments specifically for the traffic. We hope to change that with this new group that we have. They're kind of young, which again is a concern for an old administrator like me, because we got to be able to hold it back a little bit, right? Just hold on a second, right? I just want to make sure they're good tickets, not a lot of tickets, right? So
I think and I could just add about the grants. I think one of the things that, you know, we find difficult is a lot of the grants that we receive are kind of yearly grants. And there's just a lot of paperwork to get a $10,000 grant.
Right.
And it would be much better, even if it was a $30,000 grant, but that, you know, you apply once and you get $10,000 a year for the next 3 years. And you have like yearly kind of disbursements, but you're only doing one application process and one contracting process. And it can span multiple years. I mean, I think that would make it a lot easier for our staff to be able to plan for how much they could have additional in each year's budget to spend on certain traffic details. And it's the annual grant process that sometimes, because there may be some years where we could spend more and other years we spend a little bit less, but having the annual process is hard for those smaller grants.
I'll pass that comment on to the governor's traffic safety committee.
And the PTS grant specifically, or the old stuff grant, I've written that several years in a row. Typically, it is about $8,000 that we cap. And the other side of that is we're more on the educational side, right? That is productivity based. So when you put your grant application in, they want to know how many tickets you moved the previous year, and that's what they're basing your money's on.
Not how many tickets you avoided.
Well, that's the thing, right? So when we look at, when officers submit the reimbursement overtime forms, I look at that and say, okay, where's the accompanying documentation that they actually did something during these 3 or 4 hours? And he'll go, well, they didn't find anything. Wait a minute, right? We're not doing something right here, right? And they could have avoided a lot, right? You see a patrol car, a uniformed officer in a marked car, you're hitting the brake, right? It's clear it's doing something, but whether or not the tickets are being written at that time, so. Yeah, it's tricky, no doubt about it.
All right, good. So, I don't know, is there anything else you want to add to your plans? I understand, I understand that you're going to follow the path of education, enforcement, and march on.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'll add, that we did for 2023's budget, is that you may have saw this year, we were able to reinvigorate our bike patrol. And they were out in pretty full force this past summer. We are investing more money in bicycles, in 2023 budget. And so we added an additional 22,000 to buy additional bikes, get more staff trained, and even buy a couple of e-bikes. Pedal assist bikes, pedal assist, police department, yes. Just,
Maybe for the
supervisors.
senior guys. That's a big hill coming from the police department. It's a big hill. There's no way up. You either gotta go up Caney or you gotta go up,
It's a gradual training program.
I'm curious, does it say like KPD on the big bright sort of, I don't know how.
I'll say KPD.
Yeah, so we do mark the bikes up to the best of our, and they do their very, specific training program to be able to know how to operate, on these bikes. And so that's, I think, one of the new things that we're going to be rolling out in 2023, that I think will, again, help us meet our goal of trying to educate, but also be able to do more enforcement on some of, even our non-motorized areas of the city going forward. So we're excited about that, and I do think that, anybody that wants to be a police officer, let us know. And so we're definitely hiring.
Give them my number.
I've got to run to the water board meeting next week, so I do appreciate everybody's time. Thank you guys, I appreciate it, okay?
And just with what the mayor was saying, some of the officers that have been selected to be involved in this are on our infantry, so.
Yeah, they're young, they're energetic, it's great. I mean, I think, last year we put 11 through the bike school, 10 or 11. Through the bike school, which we held here locally. So we did get quite a few phone calls from, residents and in some cases news reporters that said, hey, we just saw a whole bunch of cops on bikes and something going on. So we do believe in it. Myself and Ernie, we were, early on when we started the bike unit back when, it was new to the area. Now it's not uncommon to see them, but it does offer some challenges. You can't write a ticket on a bike, so you have to call for a patrol car that has the scanning capability of the license and, everything's been digitized and electronic now. So, with that in mind, it'll have to be a cooperative effort. That's what we do. I mean, I'll show you body cam footage of an officer stopping someone on a bike. We have the lights and they'll stop someone, but then they'll immediately call for a unit and issue the ticket from the car. So it is a little bit more heavy that way. Ideally, we like to use the bikes for the educational component without actually having to write the paper, but.
I like to think, sorry, just to think how you're saying if someone sees a cop car, they'll hit the brakes, kind of the same way you'll see a cop on a bike.
Yeah. Well, those e-bikes,
They'll
maybe
drive
we'll
a
go
little
more
more carefully.
Yeah. No, I mean, even just the walking post, I think is effective for certain things, but, as I mentioned before, think about these stop sign intersections there are in Kingston. We have, your shift has got 6 at a minimum that goes out on patrol. Answering calls is the bulk of that work. The enforcement part of it's different. And in some cases, officers are somewhat resistant to actually committing to that enforcement detail while they're on the patrol shift because they don't want to get tied up on the traffic or possibly issue some sort of a summons that might take a while, knowing that the radio might be calling in a few seconds, right? So ideally, what we're looking for is a unit or a team of individuals that will do this beyond the regular patrol schedule, usually on an overtime shift, unless we can take them off without creating some hardship for the patrol guys, and allow them to go out there, essentially making their own hours. But, as I mentioned to the council before, it'd be nice to have, times days, where's the greatest frequency of the complaints in those cases? If people are if residents are complaining that individuals are riding bikes on the sidewalk instead of in the bike track or bike lanes, that's something we would want to address right away. Get the officers out, one plain clothes, one in uniform, and then address it that way. So we have our ideas, we're tossing around every week, we have a meeting with all the supervisors down there, we kind of toss it around, and some old school ideas, some new school, but we're open to any suggestion. If you have input from different jurisdictions that you dealt with or had success with, we're all ears, really. I think we're willing to listen and implement whatever program you need. So like I said, the council did provide an additional 25,000 earmarks specifically for traffic enforcement. And, we've got issues with stop signs, speeders, golf carts, right? You hear about the golf carts, right? So,
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
oh, yeah,
Yes. So yeah, I would say just, this Broadway
Broadway,
corridor with the
that's what-
parking,
and
like
that's what you
that.
said, we usually focus on is, Broadway in and of itself, essentially from Burger King all the way to the roundabout, is its own zone in our patrol map. It goes a block either way, either direction from Broadway, but, Zone 5, Patrol Zone 5 is Broadway. And we assign a car specifically in that area. Sometimes they get pulled away from different things depending on call volume, but, when the lieutenant or the sergeant assigns patrol officers at lineup, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, anyone left, maybe a floating car assigned to a specific incident. But 5 is known, so we try to keep them midway. If they're doing paperwork, you see them park at the City of Kings inside and so on. But yeah, we're open for suggestion. I know people have already commented and sent me some emails. Hey, if we're going to do this, here's some places that I've run into, and send some comments about it. So,
Do you want her to be the contact as well?
I'll put him as the contact.
Okay,
You have to give everybody his email.
You have to build your email, like me, some of your email, so we can put you in the loop, just so that.
One of the things I will say back to the speed, and I've been involved in radar for a long time, I was one of the officers that enjoyed running radar, but keep in mind, a lot of times 30 miles an hour, say on Pearl Street. 30 miles an hour is speed limit.
Pretty fast.
30 miles an hour looks like 50.
That's pretty fast.
If I went up there and did 30 miles an hour up Upper Pearl Street, everybody would sort of speeding.
Right.
And we've done it with the speed signs, we put it out there, collects the data, average speed was 36. So.
And the other, there's two other pieces that I've come to mind. When you start giving out tickets, it's gonna be the locals.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not gonna make anybody happy.
And that's one of the things I will say, the officers that have been out for the bike lane and things, they've actually taken the time to explain why. Most of them taking 3 minutes to speak to the person, unless it was a car just parked there and they left it on the windshield. But if there was someone there, they actually took the time to explain, this is why we're doing this is why it's not a good idea, just,
So what's your position on the feedback signs?
on.
Those feedback signs, the
Radar feedback.
They're great.
Love it.
Um,
We put our speed.
One on Shirley Avenue causes me to slow down sometimes.
We have two of those signs. One is strictly the speed sign, feedback. The other one does collect data from us. Both of them are in the shop right now. For repairs, and unfortunately waiting parts
Waiting on parts.
that seem to be made by some person in their basement who only makes this one piece and that's it. So I really don't know, right? I'm like, are you kidding me? Is this the only part that can fit? So apparently it is. But those have been great. It is an absolute, unless there's a storm coming or some reason where they have to be in our charging station, we put them out all the time. If I could, and I've told the council this, if I could put one on every street, I think it'd be great.
Well, I would say, I live on Clifton Avenue, and I can always tell when the train has been too long. Because on my end, I'm right off of Flatbush.
Okay.
At me, they come
They
really.
come around, oh, yeah.
And we couldn't have the sign on.
Yeah.
So if you want to put it in front of my house, it's fine. I have no problem. But.
Everybody volunteers for it. Please park it there.
But if you also want to put a cop there to slow them down, because there are definitely, it's definitely more than 30. And I can always tell, I said, the train must have been too long, because when they hit that corner, they're flying. They're absolutely flying. And One person did, I really thought they were gonna have to call KPT because somebody just literally was screaming at the other person for going 45 on the street, and they were like, who are you, or whatever. It kind of stopped, but it is a concern that I know I have, but it definitely has to do with the train. If that train is too long.
It's always the same, it's the Fan Street, as soon as it happens, they come to Farrell, I mean, just bang, down they come. And, for us, it's hit and miss. Unless we're specifically assigned to that street, just waiting for it to happen, it's hit and miss, right? Think about how many places there
Oh,
are.
yeah, no, I'm not saying you have to be there all the time, but if, in the 3 years I've been there, I haven't seen you once. If you could just be there once, it would be nice, because at least you could say, well, the cops have been here to try to, just to occasionally see. But I'm just saying, if you need a speed feedback, please put it on that
Right
corner,
there.
because it's.
They're also the ones that aren't the mobile units too, so I think going to like.
Oh, so
I
it's
know.
Hurley Avenue.
That's the one they have up there,
has
slow down too fast.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that I encourage the council to look at.
Yeah.
Solar powered, stationary,
Right.
put them on every street, they do help, they really do.
They do.
In some cases, we talk about the educational component of it, there's some individuals that just aren't, they're driving, physically they're driving, but their mind is somewhere else, they're not thinking about it, all of a sudden you see the sign flash, and go, oh geez, what am I doing, right? Not intentional, it's not the individual driving 45 miles an hour, around the train, or now I'm late, or, but yeah, I think that they really go a long way, they really do.
So, well, yeah, cars are quiet and, nowadays, people don't know. Sorry, Chris.
I know, I'm just curious, aside from the bicycle lane stuff and the parking, what's your sort of anecdotal experience with Broadway since the new infrastructure has been installed? As far as incidents or just any sort of calls, like do you feel that that's changed on Broadway as far as calls or pedestrians?
Yeah, I would say
Incidents?
my emails, when I get them, or phone calls, about equal. One is about the parking, oh, you gotta enforce the parking, they're all parking off to the side, they're blocking the lane. And two is, I was driving on Broadway, I'm doing everything right, and somebody just walked out in between these two cars. They weren't at the walking, the crosswalk, they didn't have the lights flashing. I could have, it would have been my fault, chief, and, they're very upset about it, obviously. So it does kind of go both ways on it. I myself have honestly seen that firsthand on Broadway. I'm driving and I'm expecting someone over there. Next thing you know, they pop out in front of me and,
But is that different from before with the 4 lanes?
I'd say yes.
Yeah, one thing I will say is different, I've seen it, and it cringes me, is people are using the bike lane as the other lane.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Hurley Avenue.
Oh, like
Yeah, that's
driving?
really-
Well, Hurley Avenue is very difficult in itself, where the bike lane, you have to cross it.
Yeah,
But Broadway.
people are driving in the
I've
bike
seen
lane.
people come up the bike lane, like by the underpass.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, going to Frank Guido's.
I saw that coming to this meeting.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the areas that
The
the education piece there is probably gonna be short.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, that's where I still feel, the one piece on the design of Broadway, I wish we had pushed hard on was the stanchions to keep the. And I know that DPW would hate them, but I still think it may be something
I was
over
just
time when we
I
get the stats.
Just in Boston, and they have the stanchions.
Yeah.
It's like. It works, except, I'll tell you, cars are parking, running them over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
They're
it's
not
so-
gonna solve anything, but
But it's a guide.
They help, yeah.
I guess is the best way.
Yeah.
But yeah, BPW would.
Well, snow.
Well, we have to remove snow, so.
Yes, exactly.
We have
But maybe we have them in Montreal, they, their communities deal with them. I'm curious, do we know when the numbers will come in as far as
Crash statistics?
Yeah,
Well, there's a 6-month lag
yeah,
on all of our data that we have. I have not yet, I don't receive the MV 104s by paper. Even if I did, it would be of such volume, I couldn't review it. But I have a great interest in doing measures of effectiveness, a study that I would call measures of effectiveness. Looking at not just Broadway, but all of the recent changes
Right.
to look at engineering and post-engineering to see if there's any changes and crashes. But also measures of delay and congestion as well, which we can do using some of the tools we have. I would probably get a consultant to assist us with that. So I have a lot of interest in doing that, but it's a little early, and you have to, you need time to establish a trend, which is, unfortunate, and sometimes it's gruesome, but you need to establish a trend, you need data.
You need a year or two to get people to settle into it, first off. And then you need a year to gather the data.
Yeah, but that, I mean, particularly for the stop sign initiative that we did in Uptown. I think we, as the Transportation Council, owe it to ourselves and to the public to see if this works. If it has made, if there's a safety issue, if it's made these intersections more dangerous, we need to address that. And the only way we can do that is through an objective study. So I hope to program that. But that,
Crash severity is to be, it's gonna be an interesting study.
but I'm also very interested in measures of congestion on Broadway. We have a greater role for the region through the congestion management process to look at that. But I would like to take a more detailed approach there. But that's council, the rate at which we move. Planning studies take time. So it may be a little ways off.
Thanks, I was just curious.
But we're good,
I've seen on Broadway multiple times, people using that center turning lane as fast.
Yeah, yes, becoming, yeah.
Same kind of stuff.
I would think that would be an enforceable thing now without any, additional effort. You don't need speed.
It's inconvenience, right? The officer can pull somebody over, inconvenience them for those few minutes to slow them down, right? We were talking about it before we got here, in the academy, it's all about enforcement, right? So when they come out of the academy, they're in that enforcement mode, right? They're like, okay, we got to write tickets, make arrests. I mean, and we're just trying to change that a little bit, internally even at the academy. When we talk about explaining why things are being done the way they are through that training through procedural justice, right? So I mean, that's part of it, is to train the officers when they first come in to explain why there's enforcement proceedings and things like that. So that wasn't always the case, right? When we came on, it was, here's your ticket, right? When do I go to court? It's on the ticket. That's it, right? That was just the way it was. And we've had to change that behavior now. And, but yeah, for some of the older officers that are just used to kind of doing it that way, they say, well, just once you take this card, hand it to them, explain what they're doing wrong. I'm like, or you just write a ticket. I'm like, you could, but we're trying to change the behavior without actually causing punishment.
Right, talk to people, I gotta talk to people.
Exactly.
I didn't take this job to talk to people.
Kind of an aside for a moment, some years ago, when we were heavily involved with the streetlight outages, you had, given that directive to have the overnight shift report outages.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You know if there were ever any numbers coming out of that?
I know they were doing it.
They were.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, they were definitely doing it. Oh, yeah.
We were making, actually, most of the question was directed to Central.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they weren't happy.
Access to it. But I know,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
no aid last night.
Yeah, Gary Keller's a friend of mine, and I heard through him that there was a lot of complaining about that.
Yeah, we had officers go around, and at some point, every patrol zone, the officer assigned had to go down certain streets and check and report back, hey, we got one. Terry was here, showed me a list of the times where he punched cards and then sent the email to Central Hudson. These lights are out, here's one to DPW, these lights are out, so, yeah, it's pretty effective.
That's good, because, I had reported over 350 myself, and I never knew, what happened with you guys.
Yeah, certainly with the bulbs and whatever mechanical issues they had, the LEDs are certainly.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Well, that and rolling go at once.
That's right. Good point.
All right, well, I appreciate you guys coming.
Absolutely, anytime, really.
I'll take any Nikki Jones reports back, because I do have a finance committee meeting tonight, and I wouldn't mind having a few of these meetings. Yeah,
We're gonna hold on to mine.
yes, thank you. Awesome.
I just, try to
Can
conclude,
you
right?
send a soft copy?
Yeah, I'm happy to send you the actual file.
I don't need it for paper.
Yeah.
Interested in reading.
We went from agenda item A, and the questions on
Absolutely. I'll send that to you.
what are the next steps? And the mayor and Emily answered that. But there, I have asked Emily to present to the Ulster County Traffic Safety Board. And I feel responsible because when I was on the selection committee for the Be a Road Hero campaign, one of my main points I made was I wanted a campaign that's transferable and scalable to places outside of the city of Kingston. And I'm having a difficult time making that argument to the Transportation Council. The Transportation Council paid for the bus wraps. And I think we will continue to put resources toward education. But the larger discussion of what the education campaign looks like, I can't control it. And it's a cacophony right now. I'm hearing a lot of different things from different angles. So I want to continue to have the discussion. And I've invited Emily to come. I think we'll try to fit you in at the January meeting.
Great.
We haven't formed the agenda for that meeting yet, but
That's
the Traffic Safety Board.
the traffic safety board, not the transportation.
Correct, because there's also, so the Traffic Safety Board is essentially an advisory board to the Ulster County Legislature.
Right.
But then there's the Transportation Council can put resources, but we don't have, we're not gonna administer a campaign to the extent that Emily has, where the city has said this is going to be Emily's job. I don't see the Transportation Council saying this is gonna be Brian's job. This is a major project of Brian's. It's a big undertaking. And to manage.
The council likes to have endings.
Right, and so what's the other question of what's the format? I mean, we picked
Yes.
Road Hero for this. I can't get consensus. I have not been able to get any consensus.
I think the
from-
traffic safety
from
board
members.
doesn't like the road hero, or they,
I have heard from members of the council that they don't like that they would not like to see it at countywide. Others don't really have a strong opinion. So I want to have that discussion, but it's, I don't control it.
yeah.
I mean, I struggle with that. Every person I talk to has their own opinion about what should be done. There's no way to get consensus on transportation education.
Right.
So,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I guess I sort of feel like at least but I feel, I'm just defending the city a little bit, like at least we did something.
Yeah.
It might
I-
not be perfect,
yeah.
but
And
we
don't-
did a thing.
Yeah, don't, having people talk about it is victory.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
I haven't been involved in other education campaigns. I don't think it matters. I think the thing that matters is that a campaign is being done
Yeah.
and people notice it.
Exactly.
And people are talking about it, and that somebody knows, okay, we need to be aware of traffic safety.
And there's always gonna be somebody who's gonna say, well, did you do anything to try to notify the public? Well, we did. You know, there's notification. Could be that ad that says sue the city of New York, would make me crack up all night long. It really did. Cause I just thought, whoa, somebody is not paying attention. But no, really, I think this is admirable. You should try to do some kind of educational campaign before you do the enforcement. At least say it's been out there, we tried, it's there, it's available. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you. What is your sense about, the new county executive, as far as her, maybe?
I have no
You have
sense.
no sense. I'm just wondering, if there's.
I mean,
it really shouldn't be your job. You're a planner, right?
Right.
you're not supposed to do anything.
Not saying that. Not saying that, not saying, it's obviously involved in it, but you're not saying that it should be the director of public health either. Your job, I mean, maybe. But, just thinking that it is a public health issue, and, it's really a communications issue.
Mhm.
So, there's communication staff at the county, and the county executive cares about it. And then perhaps that's an area where it could be assigned to somebody in that realm,
It's true. And the county executive can set the agenda, and the traffic safety board can encourage the agenda. And if there are resources, they can possibly channel some resources. And again, I'm sure the Transportation Council will provide some resources. But then making the decision that this is the campaign, this is the logo, this is the message. Who are we targeting? Distracted drivers, speeding, DWIs, the bike ped, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered to allocate the resources.
And if I can be humble, I feel like that was the struggle here. We did pick 3 audiences and it was too much. There is validity to that idea that the yard signs that we did have too much information.
Right.
It was really hard to not write a manifesto.
Right. And quite frankly, when I am managing the Transportation Council, all the responsibilities that we have to fulfill. And one of these, traffic safety was among the tasks of our Unified Planning Work Program. When that noise and cacophony starts to escalate, I had to step back because clearly I was not going to be able to accomplish it. And so I was just focused on the things that I can accomplish. But we'll continue to put it up front and discuss it. It's not gonna go away. It's gonna take a little more concerted effort to focus it if we're gonna go countywide.
Thank you for the bus ads and for all your support.
And we'll be fine. Make it proud.
Yeah, I think I went into Jen on the Walkill Valley Rail Trail Sunday.
So,
out the chainsaw, clearing fallen trees, and she come over to scold me for driving down the rail trail.
that's good, people are paying attention. Okay,
Before we move on to administration,
Yes.
I had emailed just the council that I would want to add something to the agenda.
yes,
We at least introduce it this month?
yes,
Because I think that you, as the council members, will get questions about it, so I want you to be aware of it.
right,
So, in the current, I don't know, how many- are you ready to give?
I read it.
You got it? You got it? Rob, can you have those right here with Kristen? Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
I want to point out that in the draft.
send me your email. I did all that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the Kingston Forward, the new zoning proposal for the city of Kingston, is in its 3rd draft. It's just been released the last week or 2. In that draft, the Complete Streets Advisory Council is part of the street design approval process. So I want you to be aware of that, first of all, that your role may be, I would say, increasing a little bit. And I can explain the process a little bit to my knowledge if you'd like, but mostly the other point of action right now is that next Wednesday is the Laws and Rules Committee. And if you had feedback on this process, that's where you would submit your public comment. And if, of course, if you are in support of the zoning, they would, of course, love a vote, a word of support for it.
Can I ask?
The rules committee?
Laws and rules,
Laws and rules.
next Wednesday, 6:30.
Can I ask Emily, do you know where this framework was originally proposed? Who proposed it? Where did it come from? Did it emerge from the engineer's office, the consultant, or?
Well, we made comments.
Yeah.
Is this ours?
One of the comments was, how are you gonna do this?
Okay.
They had all this wonderful thing about standard, it shouldn't be standards, it should be guidelines, which they need to change, which is a comment we probably should make to the Laws and Rules Committee, it should not be standards. But,
Did, so.
We came ready. This is our own.
The page I didn't send you all, but they do have a shall and should. So I know you're saying guidelines and standards, they do have qualifications for things that
Yeah.
need to happen and things that should happen.
here's the problem with standards in something like this.
Yeah.
If you deviate from the standards, you're opening yourself up to a claim, to a lawsuit. Somebody saying you didn't follow the standard and, and really we shouldn't be taking away the design professional's responsibility for designing a highway. If the standard doesn't apply or if the standard should be a guideline.
Yeah, you don't have to convince me. But I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that part.
I haven't read that part yet.
Yeah. So here, I think we have one copy, the whole.
I've got the whole thing.
Yeah, the whole zoning document is 199 pages, I think. Did you, were you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say, I don't, keep going.
To answer Brian, so I can't speak that eloquently, but I can find out how to cut funds.
Thank you.
You know, I still can't get over including these in the zoning, ordinance, but that's my own problem.
It's non-traditional because it's form-based approach.
So architectural standards as well, which is craziness, I think, to some extent. They're talking about where the building breaks have to be. I mean, this is not a window size. This is not zoning.
It's form-based zoning.
It's more basic, right. However, if I was an architect, that'd be very upset over that.
But I think actually though, architects are very open to the form-based code because it provides a lot of flexibility in what is executed.
Right, so, well, not interpreted.
So I'm curious, there's how, every time there's a deviation from the street design standard, it would then be brought, we would have to sort of,
They go through the city engineer, he
and
make a
then
decision.
come to us.
Well, he'd make a decision about whether it's significant or not.
Okay.
If it's significant, then it would go through us. Now, and from a practical perspective,
Well, it doesn't say that. I don't see that.
what does it say? I thought it said that.
That's my understanding.
Well, you're using the word significant, I don't
What
see
are
that.
they?
Determines deviation from standards are warranted.
When,
Provides justification to CSCC. So if it's not warranted, then
I think in the,
Wouldn't be
in the,
maybe in here.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like whether it's consistent with the standard or not, and then whether it's warranted or not. Where when you say significant or not, to me that creates a lot of subjectivity. As
Right.
opposed to warranted.
And what is again the deadline?
Here we go.
The deadline for comments, so will we be able to just review on our own and discuss at the January meeting, or do we need to have comments in before that?
I think the next opportunity for comments is Wednesday. I think, my understanding is that now, housing director is sort of done with this project. It's going to the common, it's now in the common council's hands. So I think other opportunities for comment will be like when the common council has a public meeting about it. It'll be at a common council meeting, but
Yeah, there's like
laws and
public hearings
rules-
in January,
I
right?
believe so.
Yeah.
So, but laws and rules is like the next opportunity and probably where you might have the most impact immediately.
Right.
But later on, there's still gonna be opportunities. And I've also heard that the idea is that this would be approved and then reviewed again in subsequent years. So that this is in some
Once it's-
ways working.
Yeah, I feel strongly that we should make a comment about guidelines versus standards. I mean, we really don't, I don't think we want to have standards in the code. We have guidelines, that's a great idea. Standards, bad idea.
Do you know what time that meeting,
What time?
the laws and rules meeting,
6:30.
6:30?
Yep.
I want to try to be over there. Maybe Bob will go with me, Pat.
I don't know, I don't look like, I don't know.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Can I make a comment? The statement of the deviations, when it is necessary to deviate, who decides if it's necessary?
My understanding is the city engineer.
Well, the engineer doing the design will propose it.
So the city engineer is the only arbiter of deciding whether something's necessary to deviate? That seems to be a lot of power in one place. We have check and balances and
Part of it is you need to have someone who has the technical credential.
I'm not saying he technically would know, but it seems like if it's one person making decision versus him and the mayor or him and someone else, or like the head of the planning board or something. I mean, it seems like, I don't know, that I'm just, again, I'm a citizen. I have worked at law firms in the past as a paralegal, but I'm not a lawyer. But it just seems like a lot of decision-making on one person. Okay, I decided it's not, and then that's it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, that's why I was sort of bringing up that difference in the word between significant and warranted. And I know it sounds like semantics, but warranted is a technical, to me, that's a technical is it warranted technically? Like, is it safe or not? Or I don't know if I'm using the.
Where is warranted? I don't see
Thinking
it.
it's more like, do I like this or not?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So there's, and the engineer has a
Or minor-
responsibility.
Is it a minor deviation from the
Yeah.
guideline, or is it
Yeah.
a major deviation from the
Right.
guideline? You know,
I want to make a point that, so the idea is that in these guidelines or standards that are in the zoning code, the idea is that this is really, this is what the streetscapes should be designed to look like. And the only time this process gets triggered is when, for whatever reason, the city engineer or the designer decides it's not gonna follow this recipe. That's when it comes to complete streets. So I think, EJ, I bring that up because this actually has the most authority than a single
Okay.
person.
I see that, right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm just saying, again, I'm on this committee from a different viewpoint than all of you. Some of you are experts in the field, have background, some have been city employees. I'm a resident and a citizen who just went through a process with Franklin Street where we, the citizens who live here, made a big fuss. No one, I mean, I don't know, because I moved here a year ago, so I don't know what had happened before. But so my point is that we're kind of leaving out anybody's making a stand and saying, you shouldn't do that because of X. We're having one city employee decide if it's okay for it to deviate or not. That's my point. It's really more of a point of interest to be discussed than to say, you know, oh, this is
See
horrible.
that in here because every one of these items mentions in coordination with the planning administrator. And
Except that one. D does not.
They've all got something where there's kind of checks and it's in the system where there's multiple layers involved, multiple groups.
Final review and action, D, final action and review be determined by the planning board for new streets.
Or the DPW. But to get to that stage, the city engineer, and John and I have a great relationship. I'm not saying it's about John. It's about just the language that would be if someone else had John's job. The language says the city engineer makes the decision about whether it's a deviation or not.
It actually doesn't. It says the city engineer in coordinating with the planning administrator.
Will review and decide whether to accept or reject. But
Yeah, so that's gonna be,
I'm talking about language that's going to be law, right? If this is accepted, this is going into the code. Every word is important. That I do know from many years of experience. But the point is that if you say a justification of the deviation will be provided by the city engineer, if he or she chooses not to provide that, then that deviation doesn't get forwarded down the road to the other parts, to us, to the planning board, et cetera. That's a place where it can stop.
well, it does say, I think it's confusing because in the boxes below, it really only has city engineer. It doesn't say city engineer / planning administrator.
That's exactly my point.
if you're talking about an engineering decision, okay, lane width, okay? And I believe that the person who's going to be on the hook for that decision should be a licensed professional. And the only licensed professional we have here is the city engineer in this process.
I agree with that. I am not saying that the person who has the job of city engineer is not a professional. I'm saying that you are putting one person's decision, you're saying that this process of a deviation stops at this person. And if they say, no, that's it, it doesn't go forward. That is a lot of authority and power for one person in one job. I'm talking about checks and balances. So here's an idea. The city engineer proposes it to this council. Here, these people have these things and they think it's a deviation. Then you've got more people involved in the process. This is my viewpoint about this. I feel very strongly that unless you're the president of the United States, and even then he takes decisions from advice from all kinds of people, having one person make a decision about something that is going to affect forever once the project is planned
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I do also have a little bit of an objection to having one person making that decision. And maybe there's a way that the city engineer makes a recommendation, whether it's warranted or not, to the advisory council, and then it.
Whether
maybe there's a
deviation
way.
from, so what you're proposing is that the city engineer makes a recommendation about a deviation that's suggested by a designer.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I said. If he comes to the council,
And says to them, I don't think this is a good idea.
he gives his opinion, right? Yeah,
Creating it so it's more of a dialogue rather than like the engineer makes a decision and then the way it's written here is the engineer makes a decision. Well, it says with the planning administrator, so that is actually two people. And
It's
then,
additive as you
and
work your way down. There's no point where one person's making a decision.
It seems as if, from what I'm hearing, you're assuming that the engineer is, I don't know, in a vacuum. All of this has been in conversation, at least up to this
Yeah.
point. I mean, there's been some discussion. And the way I understand it, it's that the city engineer has to make a call as to whether or not this is a substantiated or not substantiated deviation, and it's a yes or no. More than likely, from a pure safety standard as to whether or not this is gonna fly, whether or not it's in guideline or code or consistent with other measures. I don't get the sense that it is just the city engineer saying, oh, okay, yes, no, I wanna do it, I don't wanna do it.
that's not what I'm saying.
But that's what it sounded like, so I'm just trying to.
Okay, then let me explain, please. Okay, so let me explain. A justification for the deviation will be provided by the city engineer. What if we don't ever hear, and that's coming to this council, what if we never hear about the deviations? So again, this is about the process of involving the people who are involved, who will be living in the areas. I'm coming from a very different viewpoint again.
But D flows out of the items above. Up in B say, city engineer in coordination with the planning administrator. If there's a deviation detected at that point, then it's the city engineer's job to move it forward, to run it through complete streets, etc. The engineer himself is not the only one making the decision about this deviation.
There is still consultation.
Well, the planning administrator will have the right to say to the city engineer, I disagree with you, I think it's a deviation. That needs to be made clear. This is in coordination with. Coordination meaning, okay, I've talked to you and now I'm making a decision. I know I'm splitting hairs, but if we're putting this in language that's going to be in a code 10 years from now, this has to be really very clear. That is how I feel about it. I may be the only person on this council that thinks that way, but to me, if you're writing things down, it needs to be very clear. The city engineer and the planning administrator each has the right to say, I think this is a deviation and it goes to the council. That would be appropriate.
Well,
That's how
is the council gonna be the determiner about whether a deviation?
DC, it's in D, yes, it comes to us. And then it looks like it's being sent to the other two.
I'm gonna want an engineer to put their butt on the line to say that it's safe. I'm not gonna, as a
Right,
council.
well, actually, I was
I'm not
thinking
gonna
of
say-
that
the
too.
Council can't say, it's a good idea.
Then we'll be brought to court or something. Something happens, yeah.
There's gotta be a licensed professional in this train.
I'm not saying that he cannot be involved. Y'all are missing the point. The point is that if the planning administrator has, I think it's a deviation, and the city engineer says, I don't, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Again, this is about the involving more than one person. Yes, he's an engineer. The planning administrator might be, who is the planning administrator anyway? Someone with city urban planning background, is that right?
It's a civil service position.
Well, but it is somebody with
Planning act.
planning,
Decades of planning experience.
experience, and that's what they're doing, and I think
I'm sorry, let me just interrupt, Claudette. That's my point. If the planning administrator is an equal professional, we've got two professionals. So I would like to see language that says the planning administrator can also decide and say, I think this is deviation. I want it to go to the council. To me, it sounds like the only one person is making the decisions about the deviation. I absolutely think that a professional would make the right choice, but there is no check and balance to that. If there are two people, then one person can say, I think it should go, and he says, well, I don't, and then it goes to the committee, and vice versa.
So are you saying that if the planning administrator or director, whoever, says, I think there's a deviation, and the city engineer says, well, I don't think there is a deviation, you still want it to go forward to the council for us to say?
They have to present their facts. They have to present the facts, absolutely.
Yeah, but you want us to be the determining factor as to whether or not there is or there isn't. And let's just say that we say that we agree with the planning administrator, but the engineer, who is the licensed person whose butt would be on the line if it's a safety issue, we're gonna override them. I'm just trying to get.
We're not going to override something if it's a safety issue. I firmly believe that we've got intelligent people sitting in this room. Come on, I think that's going a little far.
Well, it sounds to me like that's what you're doing.
No, I'm not saying. There are other issues besides safety. Safety is not the only thing when you're considering a street project. Bluestone, please remember this. There are incidences where things are ignored or passed over, or people make decisions that other people don't know about. I'm being very open and honest. That is exactly where I'm coming from. That's one of the reasons I wanted to be on this committee. The people who are not professionals, who will be living in the results of whatever these plans are, have to have a place where they can say what's going on. A planning administrator and a city engineer are two different viewpoints. That gives more opportunity for people to say, wait a minute, this looks like a deviation. Oh, I don't agree. Then we go and we have other people. And so fine, if we vote with the city engineer, great. But closing it down to one person to stop plans or any deviation that might be able to be might happen, I think is, and you can.
We also have to bear in mind, this portion of the code applies to new roadways. Not a lot of those going to happen in Kingston, and major reconstructions.
And what was Franklin Street but a major reconstruction of a street?
I don't know, was it? Would it have got the?
Yes, the sidewalks were torn up, the street was repaved.
I think I need to, because I hear some of what, it's EJ, right? It's saying.
Elizabeth,
I feel like we need to think about it some more, because what I hear her saying is that it's eliminating the public, agency in the decision, or the ability for the public to influence the decision. And I think I need to reread the standards or the guidelines to understand.
Thank you.
So should we, before Wednesday, write a note to the Laws and Rules Committee saying we have some concerns. We'd like to look more to come later.
Yeah, perhaps that would be.
We're not going to have an answer by Wednesday.
Yeah, it's hard to think to pull together by Wednesday. I think it's, and like you say it should be guidelines, not standards, but I haven't read the new standards yet either. So it's, and then what are we talking about when we're talking about deviations?
Well, it sounds to me like you're talking about design.
We're talking about
Everything.
Design.
Yeah, but the design to me comes before this part of it, and it would have been included. So I'm just I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to understand.
I agree with you. And again, my only experience has been the fact that people didn't think that the block that they were saying we're not going to put the Bluestone cared. Yes, we actually did care. So again, if that had been something considered way before, it wouldn't have, whatever. So the point is that we don't know who's going to care about what. And so having one person who doesn't live in the environment that's being considered say, okay, I don't think it is, but then people say, well, wait a minute, you don't realize that when I drive out of here, blah, blah, blah. I mean, again, we don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. And so if we're writing code, I think we need to be, as Kristen said, we need to be a little more conscious of what this is going to, how the public can be reflected, because they're the people who are going to be living in it. Any changes made affects their life.
Guidelines at all.
Wait, what?
I think what I'm getting at is that, just having participated in the processes here at the city, there is a balance, and this, and I don't want to be talking about John, because I as well, I also love John. But there is a balance between an engineering perspective, and there's safety, and that they're going to put their license on the line. And also having the engagement of the public and trying something
Right.
innovative. I mean,
Right.
honestly, the Broadway Streetscape Project
I remember.
really put a lot of engineers
I remember.
feeling very nervous. And, you know, to push an engineer may decide that, you know, a deviation is not warranted because they're scared of that innovation. And so
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah.
provide an opportunity for the public that, you know, Bike Friendly Kingston or whoever, you know, the public to really push the
Which
city.
again, goes back to my
So
argument
that's-
against guidelines.
Yeah,
Guidelines kill innovation.
The other thing
Yes,
is,
but guidelines also are guidelines, not the law. So again, there would be still availability.
It's standards. And
Okay.
standards are the law.
we also have to keep in mind is this is when it reaches the administration point. Before this, you've got all the public meetings and so forth. around.
Okay, you know what? I'm sorry.
yeah, I feel like I need to understand it better.
Yeah.
We all need to understand.
Public meetings were not held.
So, all right, so thank you for introducing that. So what I would suggest is that we write a note to the Laws and Rules Committee saying, we've read it, we have some concerns, we'd like some more time.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And then we'll all have a chance to reread the
Right.
standards and think about this in greater depth.
Can I mention guidelines? No?
Yeah, or, well,
No,
read the existing standards.
Say that we need more time to consider it. That's all. No,
I'd like to make a proposal. If anybody would like to have a separate conference call with me, I have a Zoom account to talk about the standards, you know, ad hoc off of this. I'd be glad. If I can do that, Emily, is that,
Fits into the whole thing.
Of the entire group.
Right, there's certain open meeting laws about that.
Right, yeah, we can't.
If you have
No,
a
we
certain
can't.
number of council members, it has to be public.
Right.
The open meetings law doesn't permit.
oh,
us to
okay,
do
okay, fine, sorry.
No, it's okay.
that. But we can communicate over email, that's not a meeting.
Okay, okay.
We could just,
Do you remember, it's like you can't make decisions,
You can, I don't think you can even. I don't
is this
think
a closed session?
but if there's, it's like if you're over quorum by email,
Yes,
it
that
has
is
to be
different.
publicly documented,
A decision or just a meeting, just a discussion?
the discussion.
Really?
I believe that what I've done for Live Well is I've tacked it onto the meeting minutes.
At the end of it?
Is this group allowed to go into closed session where you would have?
I was-
Yeah, but all very limited things for executive session.
So there would be no,
So I was, well, in fact, I was,
Personnel issues.
well, I was gonna propose executive session for the new applicant that has joined us.
Huh?
So for Live Well, we go into executive.
Yeah, but then you're not allowed to talk about things that are not.
No, right, but you, that's all you can talk
Right,
about.
right, right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So before we do new applicant, but we might want to,
Let me just interject. Administration, at this point in time, when I've done this in your lab, and say, that's it, I'm done, you're the chair.
Thank you, Bob, for your service.
I would like to see the rest of this document and where this fits in it, because to me, this is the tail end of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
right.
So
that's what I was saying.
You're right.
so I already am gonna send you all the Mickey Jones document. I'll send you, well, actually, I already sent you the link. I'll send you, the PDF's too big to send. I'll send you the link to where you can get
You
it.
have a Dropbox or anything?
Well, you can get it off
He's
the.
gonna send you a link.
Yeah.
Okay.
You do that.
I'm gonna send you, it's on HPC right now.
Oh, okay.
It's Payson forward,
Right, right.
so I'll send you the link to it, okay?
And also bear in mind, two things. One is this is a minor, these are rare occurrences where there's gonna be this kind of work being done in the city of Kingston because of our age. I mean, if you were in the middle of Florida, you'd have to deal with the small project. We're not doing the roads. That's first. Second, they have to go through a whole series of stuff with the common council. They have to go through a whole environmental process. They're not, we're not talking about anything occurring on this, in my opinion, until next year. Next year, I mean, this time next year.
Yeah, and if it's a federal aid project, there's a separate design process.
exactly.
As part of it, so.
For the highway. So, so there's no rush on this.
Yeah.
That's,
I just, it's worth
Okay.
thinking about.
Administration?
Administration, John, how about, now it's a perfect time for you to take over. 'cause
That would be fine.
Next year.
Can I
Congratulations.
Can I propose process for this next section of the agenda? So Ella is here
Yep.
she has put in a proposal. Can I suggest that she introduce herself
Yes, yes.
and then we talk about, then she can go because she's been here a long time. And then the council talk about meeting dates for the next year and then we go into executive session to decide if you want to recommend her to be appointed.
Sure,
That's perfect.
that's pretty much what I was gonna do anyway.
Great. Okay. I'm sorry to taking that over. It just seems clear.
Not my first rodeo. Hey, Ally, you're up.
Okay, hi, I didn't know I was gonna talk, but, hi, I'm Ella Conrad. And yeah, John, I was talking to you about, you suggested that I apply, so, this is just a topic, an area of interest of names. I think it was the last meeting I was here, asking about Henry Franklin Street and, I'm involved in WUDA, Writers of Ulster Transit. Let's see, I actually moved to this area almost 20 years ago for college, so I've been here a while. And yeah, do you guys have any questions for me about anything? I'm not really good at talking about myself. So.
Can you talk a little bit about your Binghamton experience?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, I was involved in AmeriCorps as a mobility management associate. So I kind of ended up in Binghamton. And my job was basically to create a call center for people, who have trouble getting to where they need to go for appointments, things like that. And in Binghamton is another place that was also an IBM town. And part of the town was actually built by IBM back in the day. And then of course IBM left them too. And so it's a very poor place, but it's also very sprawled. So people have trouble getting around. A lot of people have trouble getting around. So anyway, that was a really interesting project. It kind of introduced me to this area. So I feel like I'm coming to this area from that perspective, like social services. I'm also a speech language pathologist and working in the medical area. So I have an interest in people and and I just read a lot and I think a lot. I write about this area, which is a very interesting area to me. So
I read several items that Ella wrote that were published in, I think it was Kingston Water.
yeah.
And, clearly she's done some research. So I kind of piqued my interest when she came to the last meeting. We had a conversation, so I thought she was somebody to approach about joining us.
Thank you, so it's a perfect time.
Yeah.
Oh, we should say that publicly, right? So Andy Levin, she has a name.
Andy?
Turco Levin has officially stepped down from Complete Streets. So we have an open seat.
She'd rather train dogs.
She didn't say that. I did, yeah, and I did thank her because she has given a lot to this council and to the Kingston Land Trust.
Yes.
So she has done her service.
Oh,
And to the common council. She was a.
Yeah, she's done
She was
it.
We're not letting you go in the box. Okay.
No, it's good. Andy has done a great job. She really has given us great insight over the years. And it's been a pleasure to have her with us. We should write our note.
That I generated that. I feel like that's the chair's responsibility.
Better write a to-do list.
All right, do we want to talk about meeting dates? So we don't currently have any meetings on the calendar for next year. Elizabeth, you were talking about this time. We started at 4 today, I believe. I cannot do the third Wednesdays. We were previously doing it on the second Wednesdays. To do second Wednesdays at 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. work for everyone? I'll start there.
Yes.
I still wish they were later, but I'm going to try to make some. This is the busiest time for my industry, and so I can't be away from the office for it's almost 3 hours. Hopefully in January I'll be able to be in person, but the later the better. So 4 is fine. If we could do later, I'd be happier, but it's up to everybody else.
For.
It looks like second Wednesdays are okay for me.
Later would not work for me.
What are we talking, Wednesdays?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Wednesday.
Second one.
Second.
Yeah. We were also talking about
Didn't
meeting.
decide that, or that was temporary?
One day, one time we did do it on a Thursday.
Okay. I thought, for some reason, I have been going into 2023 on Thursdays, but I guess that was never confirmed.
I don't recall.
Are we meeting every 2 months now? Are we
Oh, that's
talked
what
about a
it's-
greater frequency?
Yeah.
We talked about scheduling it monthly, but based on agenda items, maybe not. Didn't have an agenda item.
I would recommend that we schedule it every 2 months and then on the other months, the sidewalk task force meets. That the.
Like this sidewalk task force or whatever.
You're chairing?
He's good. He's good.
I didn't say that.
I thought that's what that was about.
I said I would be on it, but if there is
Well,
need
you
to
have the
chair,
history.
if there is need to chair, I may be able to do that.
What happened to our intern? She's still around?
Wait,
No,
before we go
gone,
there, can we decide the dates?
Yeah,
Sorry. So right on the table right now is every other month, Complete Streets, every other month, Sidewalk Task Force, second Wednesdays, 4 to 5:30.
Starting in January or February with the every other month.
Starting, so January, I propose would be Complete Streets. February would be Sidewalk Task Force.
Okay.
It's January 11th.
At what time did you say?
4 to
4
5:30.
o'clock. 4 o'clock.
I'm sorry, I have a question. What is this sidewalk task force?
the long answer. Perhaps review the beginning of the meeting, if there's the recording, the mayor was talking about it.
Okay, I'll.
It's just a long answer.
Okay, so I can read up on it on the website? Is there
No.
some?
No, review the recording of this meeting where the mayor requested.
Right, yes, okay, I will. I did listen, but I may not have heard everything you said. Okay, thanks.
How
So
many people are gonna be on the sidewalk task force?
Uh,
I guess is the question.
Well, I
Like,
think we could probably,
you have to enjoy it?
January.
yeah, talk about that in January.
Okay.
We're way over time
Okay.
already for people.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This is about the continuation of Complete Street projects. Is that what you're talking about?
No, this is the sidewalk task force was it 4 or 5 years ago already? They reviewed our sidewalk codes and we made amendments to them and they were approved by the common council. And the next phase is how do we implement them and pay for these changes? And that's what the task force is, would be looking at. And what are the options? How can we pay for it? That's what,
Right, I did hear all that. I'm sorry. I understand now what you're talking about. Never mind.
There's a big
Thank
thing about this.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to get files from old files. or something.
Old files from me. I
Yeah.
have the box, I have your box of files, don't worry. Okay, so I don't hear anyone proposing a different time. I know I'm not leading this meeting, I'm sorry, John, but I do want. I have the finance committee meeting at 6:30, I was hoping that's.
Food would be good. Okay,
Okay, so I'll send out calendar invites,
Starting in
starting in
January,
January,
second Wednesday, 4 p.m.
something like say for.
it works.
All right. Then,
Enough of this.
yeah, this was the wrong meeting, streets are ending.
You're welcome to the agenda.
Um,
Still take, yeah,
Glowing story.
Adjourn.
Yeah, so actually,
that's where every meeting should start, in a second.
so I was proposing that we go into an executive section.
We'll get one issue of that,
Was that?
one issue for executive session.
Yeah, that's it. Was that, yes. I mean,
We'll end this meeting then, go into executive session, restart.
for the, well, we made a motion.
I'll move into executive session.
Second.
New member.
All in favor?
Is that an appointment?
Yes,
I made it.
favor, yes.
It's
Okay.
a recommendation.
All in
Make a
favor?
recommendation.
So, Elizabeth, that means I'm gonna stop the Zoom web
You're gonna
stream.
resign.
So.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Okay, happy holidays, everybody.
My residency alone,
Be a problem.
I mean, it's not like I don't spend enough time.